Hey, howdy, hey, friends and neighbors. It's Scott here, and for today's video, we're going to talk all about dosing with herbs, or what quantities and what frequencies to use with various types of herbs. The very unsatisfactory answer is that it depends on a lot of things, such as the general safety of the herb. Something that's very safe, like echinacea or cleavers or plantains, very, very safe, and you could really eat just about all you wanted of those versus something like poke root or lobelia, where you really have to be careful with how much you get. It makes a big difference. Also, you may just have a specific reaction or an allergy to something, in which case you wouldn't want to take any of something, ideally. Or, uh, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't think you would want to take any of it if you were allergic to it. And sometimes you have just an affinity for a certain herb. Like, for me, I really agree with, or it really agrees with me, peppermint. Peppermint, peppermint and me are best friends, and oat straw. I really get along with oat straw, and those are pretty safe herbs anyway. But I can really get a lot of those. Or you might find that it just takes more of a certain herb to get the effect you want, and as long as it's a safe herb, that's not a problem. Um, and then you have to be aware of drug interactions or potential herb to herb interactions. Say if you are taking garlic, something that can lower your blood pressure, if you were going to go in for a surgery, you would want to probably stop taking the garlic for maybe a couple of weeks before that surgery to get it out of your system, so that you don't have a danger of bleeding out. That would be very bad. Um, herbs can interact with one another. Um, the the example that jumps to mind is really not exactly an interaction, but if you take a lot of a mucilaginous herb, like something in the mallow family, that's really goopy, it's very demulcent and slimy. If you were to take like some powdered herb with that, then that slimy, goopy stuff is probably going to hold on to your other herb and keep you from absorbing it. So it makes the other one less effective. Not really because it's chemically canceling it out somehow in your body, but just because it's keeping you from absorbing it. And the dosage could vary depending on a person's overall health or a specific condition. Say, if you have a strong, healthy young man in the prime of his life, um, and you give him a certain amount of something pretty significant, like poke root, something, a serious herb, a certain amount that would be completely appropriate for him, something that he could handle. If you tried to give that same amount to a person that was perhaps very, very elderly or very sick, on the verge of death, and you gave them the same exact amount, their body probably couldn't handle it. You might push them over the limit. Or specific health conditions, like if a person has very high blood pressure, if you had an herb that tended to, as a side effect, raise blood pressure, you wouldn't want to give that person that herb, certainly not very much of it, not without giving them something to counter that. And then things like the size of a person, their age, body mass, and gender, actually, too. I guess that's probably not the PC version of gender. I'm talking about, the actual biological differences. You know what I'm talking about. But men and women use different we use the same hormones, but we use different proportions of the hormones. And then at different stages in our lives, we have our proportion of hormones switches around, and so men and women might need different amounts of different herbs. Um, of course, little bitty babies will not need the same amount of an herb as a grown person. That is a bad idea to start stuffing little bitty babies with a whole bunch of herbs. You want to be careful with your little bitty babies. And we'll actually have some charts for that to help you out. And just body size. If you have uh, if you have two women the same age, and one of them is real skinny and one of them is real big, it's probably going to take more herb to affect the woman that's bigger, just because there's more body mass for the herb to circulate through. And it could depend. If we're just talking about a digestive bitter, it may take an equal amount, because the digestive system might be relatively the same. But if it's something that's going to um, diffuse through the body to have an effect, you would probably need more. So let's talk about some of the categories of herbs, the safety issue. You have your um, normalizers, or things that provoke a normal function. These are the safest herbs, things like nutritive herbs or tonics. These are uh, generally speaking, you won't get too much of these herbs. I guess you don't want to make a blanket statement because there's always a way to get too much of something. I mean, you can get too much water, right? Um, the joke is it's called drowning, but there's also water poisoning. You literally can drink too much water. So I guess you could get too much of these herbs too, but these are not the ones to worry about. These are the ones that are generally considered safe. Um, a average amount and frequency for these herbs, 2 to 4 grams of it dried, about 2 to 4 milliliters in a tincture, uh, about 3 times a day. And it's not really something that you need to worry about if you get a little bit too much or a little too little. Nettles are an excellent, very safe herb in this category. Cleavers, oat straw, love oat straw. Echinacea, and any of the other herbs that we also consider food, like garlic. You can you you probably aren't going to get too much garlic because you just can't, because there's only so much garlic you can get yourself to eat. Um, now, goodness, what was I thinking of here? Oh well, if it springs up, I can't just sit here forever. If it pops into my head, I'll let you know. Let's look at some slightly more, let's say herbs we want to give more respect. Oh, I know what I was going to say on those others is those nutritives or the normalizers. If you're a beginner with herbal medicine, that's a really great category to start experimenting with because it's very safe, and you unless someone has an allergy or some specific reaction, you generally don't have to worry about um, about the dangers of the herbs. You can feel a lot safer experimenting and kind of getting your legs underneath you as you work it out. Now, in as you get to stronger herbs, the dosage would go down, about half, like about 1 to 2 grams dried or 1 to 2 milliliters in a tincture. And you do want to get your dosing right, but you don't want to be paranoid or don't lay up at night worrying about it. Just this is as you step up into more potent herbs, it's if this is a good next step, sundews, things like that. Now the extremely strong herbs, these are the things that you do want to stay up at night. If you think you made a mistake, you go back and check. If you're if you're not completely confident with these, don't use these. These would be plants that you would use less than a milliliter in a tincture form, and it's really important that you get the correct amount. And don't take that 1 milliliter thing as a prescription. Really, don't take any of this as a prescription. I'm not a doctor. I'm not prescribing you anything. But um, check each plant with multiple sources, multiple trustworthy sources before you start putting something in your body or in somebody else's body. Um, Maybe even train underneath a experienced herbalist to get some specific knowledge on these. Some of the plants here, lobelia. Actually, lobelia is one that it has sort of a self-limiting mechanism because it's also called pukeweed. If you get too much lobelia, your body says, "Oh, I'm not having any of this," and you throw up the part that you don't want. And as long as you stop there, you're okay. But if you keep taking the lobelia, then you can get into trouble. But these others, like lily of the valley and poke root, oh my goodness, be careful with that, please. When we're dealing with the elderly, you want to keep in mind a few things like the digestive system in elderly patients usually will absorb things more slowly. They usually have less digestive juices squirting out of there. So it doesn't mean that they're not going to absorb it. It's just going to happen more slowly. So the effects of something that they take might not be as potent or as quick acting. They also have some declining renal function as typical, so you don't want to overwhelm the kidneys just to slam them with a bunch of diuretics or something that could be overtaxing. And they're more likely to be on a variety of medications, so you really have to be aware of those drug and herb interactions. Now, everybody wants to know, how much do you give a child, or how much is a dose for an adult, and then how much for an 11-year-old, and how much for a 2-year-old. Well, I pulled these charts out of Medical Herbalism by David Hoffman as one sample chart for comparative dosages. And you might also want to look at Rosemary Gladstar's Medicinal Herbs. It has a lot of good. It has some good charts on dosage for different sized little peoples. And there's not really one official authoritative chart or formula that you can use. It depends on who's making the chart. But you can look at this one, or here's another one on the next page. And if you take notes from both of those, you'll see that they actually come up a little bit different where they have the same ages. Look around the 7-year mark, I think, and you'll see a little bit different. So there's a little flexibility here, and you can look up formulas that you can use for, say, the body weight or the what do they call it? Body area? Something like that. You can find formulas where you can calculate something just exactly, but then you can look at another website and get a formula that works it up a little bit differently. And that kind of covers this. Feel free to go back and pause on any of these, of course, if you want the notes. Or if you would like these notes in a ready-made form, let me give you a shameless plug for my Patreon site. If you want some more, like if you want just the notes of this on a PDF where you can print them out, and those charts where you can print them out, or if you want to support the anti-zombie efforts, why don't you head on over to patreon.com/foragersguide and give it a look-see. I've got some things on there that are free, and I have some things that you can access for as low as $1 per month. Hey, you weren't using that dollar, right? Maybe you were. It's up to you. I'm not trying to push anybody or guilt anybody into anything. But if you're interested in some more content, you're certainly welcome to go over there. Hey, if you wanted to join up just for 1 month, just to get the free stuff, and then download whatever there was and then cancel, is not going to hurt my feelings either. That's the way you play the system, right? Okay, that's going to wrap it up. I'll see you in the next video. I want you to keep your eyes out for those plants and for those zombies, because they're coming. I'm telling you, it's just a matter of time. Happy foraging, everybody.